Hey, listeners, welcome back to the ValueHunt podcast. And today I'm really happy to be here with Brendan. He's the CEO and founder of New Horizon Aircraft. And they're building really cool things. So I think this will be an interesting conversation, especially since I'm taking mechanical engineering. So this has a lot to do with it. Yeah, Brendan, why don't you say a couple of words before we jump into the hard questions?
Oh, well, just thanks very much, David, for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Nice, perfect. So, first question I have for you is actually, what does New Horizon do in a simple way for the people that might not be aware of what you guys are doing?
Sure. So, Horizon Aircraft is designing and building a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So, simply put, it's a very unique design in the space, very differentiated. It can take off and land just like a helicopter. So, from any helipad, any flat space, any parking lot, it can take off and land vertically. But en route, it has a different configuration than a helicopter, so it can travel about twice as fast and is about 70% cheaper to own and operate per unit mile than a helicopter. So think helicopter capability, cheaper, faster, and that's pretty much what we're designing.
Nice, nice. That's interesting. And my next question is actually on how you went public, but I want to make sure that the listeners are aware that this interview will be more focused on the product because I feel like that's the most interesting part to talk about right now, and also the fact that you were an Air Force pilot. So I think that's a pretty cool background right there. So yeah, disclaimers apart. Why did you decide to go public?
So, yeah, I mean, I could go into a little bit of my background if you'd like first, and then kind of weave that into it, if that works,
Yeah, yeah,
or you want to
sounds
just
good.
me to jump right into it. So, long story short, yeah, I flew F-18s in the Air Force for about 20 years. Did the Canadian version of Top Gun, and managed to meet a bunch of really great folks along the way. Got a mechanical engineering degree, some advanced business degrees, but near the end of my career, uh, we had an opportunity where my father was working in the aerospace industry as well. He ran his own company. He was approached by a group of investors, and they wanted to understand if it made sense to develop an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So these new sort of multi-copter type of machines, transporting people around cities and within cities with all electric architectures. And they wanted a concept put together. And so we had a pretty significant understanding of the operational realities of operating an aircraft, in bad weather and challenging airspace considerations. We thought that there was a gap arising in the marketplace where we could come up with a unique design that was hybrid electric. So it had gas on board, but it could recharge its batteries after takeoff and in flight. Anyway, we put together a really compelling concept for this group of investors. And that's how the company was born. So I'm going to fast forward to going public because that was the original question.
Yeah,
During that really high interest rate time, investors, especially here in Canada, on the private side, we're reticent to really jump in on these hard tech companies that we were going to be quite a while before we generated revenue, and that sort of dried up a little bit. And then we found a partner that was really excited about our company and the ability to raise capital in the public sector. They thought the story really resonate. The team was exceptional. The product was very differentiated. And we could create a situation where there was tremendous upside for investors after going public, alongside a few other different creative ways of raising capital. And they thought our authenticity and our laser focus on protecting our shareholders and not diluting them was the right mentality going forward. We knew it was going to be an uphill battle, given sort of the SPAC world, and especially what happens to a lot of DSPAC companies. We went in with our eyes open, but the strong partnerships and the investors that we had sort of in the chamber, if that makes any sense, we're pretty happy with the decision, and they bought into our longer term plan. So this is not a short term sort of pump up the stock price and get out. This is a very long term vision with an authentic company that's building value for its shareholders. So, and I think we're starting to do that now, which is nice.
hmm yeah. So just guide us through. at what stage of like the product development are you? Because uh, um, basically we know you're pre-revenue, right? So you haven't launched yet officially. So yeah, just make that a bit more clear.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. So, to simplify it, we have a large scale prototype aircraft. So 15 feet long. It's got a 22-foot wingspan. Think it's almost like a small general aviation aircraft. That is a subscale prototype, and it is almost through flight test, and we have one more flight to go. And so we've largely proven the technology is going to work, and we are now building the full scale aircraft. So companies in our space with a full-scale technical demonstrator aircraft, Joby, Archer, they're multi-billion-dollar market caps, and so there's very significant upside, even vertical with $400 or $500 million market cap. So we're not far away from a very significant valuation sort of step change. We have a great team, and we're really capital efficient, and we will have a full-scale technical demonstrator in the next 24 months that is ready to do flight testing. So that's kind of where we're at. There's a lot of really interesting technical milestones along the way to kind of prove to investors that we're making that progress. And we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah. So like at least um, from my style of investing, usually like I can only value something when it's like generating revenues and profits. So maybe kind of guide us through like how do you plan to kind of sell and market this product? Because I'm not like too familiar with who is the like target customer or who would be the end user of this kind of solution.
Yeah, another great question. So, generally speaking, the analysts in our space will use some sort of discounted cash flow model. There's a lot of companies in our space that won't produce revenue for several years, but they have very exceptional products that if everything goes well, will sell quite broadly. Um, so I think from a revenue generation perspective, we can break it into two sectors. Okay, so military and civilian. On the civilian side, we've already been approached by a number of regional operators and lessors. So people with the money that buy the fleece that then lease the machines out to the regional operators. We've been approached by those two broad groups alongside some OEMs that are quite interested in the technology and the platform, and they simply want to buy airplanes right now. They want to get their foot in the door for early production slots. They're convinced that the technology is going to work, and when we put it together and we start rolling these aircraft out, they want the first ones to be able to start doing useful work. Right? If you have a helicopter fleet, but primarily you're just going from point A to point B, you're pretty interested in a machine that is not only more comfortable, but can save you up to 70% per unit mile when you travel. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have under NDA have shared our costing data, which is put together by professional aviation operators that has proven it, and they're pretty excited about it, right? So that's on the operator and on the lessor side, and to a certain degree on the OEM side as well. On the military side, I mean, essentially, if you have a helicopter that goes twice as fast as a normal helicopter, the special forces guys are pretty interested. The military folks that are doing casualty evacuation or resupplying forward operating bases, all sorts of different military operations, right? If as a fighter pilot in the Air Force that planned and led NATO coalition strike missions, if I had one of these machines in the repertoire, I would have loved it, right? It opens
Yeah.
up a lot of different capabilities. And so, from a revenue generation perspective, there's the technology pillar. So, there's a lot of companies, defense primes, OEMs looking at the technology itself. So, leasing or a royalty model for using the lockdown technology. So, that's one piece. The second piece is upfront payment for early production slots, non refundable type of stuff. These slots are transferable, so they become a commodity themselves, which is pretty interesting. So if you manage to snag, the first 10 slots of our production run, maybe you can sell them at a profit to somebody else. That's been really interesting as well. And then, of course, um, selling the aircraft themselves in a few years and generating revenue that way.
Mhm. Just to continue, I'm curious to know also like on what type of margins we are looking at? Because obviously you don't know yet, you're not yet in like into like full scale production, but yeah, as we know, like these are complex products and like they are not like cheap to produce. So yeah, maybe if you could paint some more color in that, it would be helpful.
Absolutely. So, unlike a lot of the other companies in this space, we're using sort of traditional aircraft manufacturing techniques that are well known. My father was in advanced manufacturing for like 4 decades. Johnson Johnson Pharmaceuticals producing, high volume production lines of surgical stents and staplers and other medical equipment. So his lifetime of manufacturing experience. What's generally accepted in this space is kind of a 50% gross to net out 15 to 20% net profit. Um,
Mm,
and that's a very, very reasonable thing that is kind of generally accepted. And that's what we're targeting right now. So
mm.
from our unit sales, again, everything distilled to the bottom, we'll have a 15 to 20% net profit margin year over year.
Nice, interesting. Okay, so yeah, going back to product, I'm just like interested in knowing um, more about the like the wing enclosed lift system, because I guess that's part of like the value add that you're giving to these products. So yeah, I'm just if you can like explain a bit better what that consists and all that.
Yeah, excellent. Another fantastic question. So most companies in this space, you'll see Joby and Archer's machine, you'll see numerous other machines. They're essentially multi-copters, right? They have 6 or 8 sort of open rotors. They tilt forward at some point, and then you're flying along with 6 or 8 sort of fans spinning, and that's a very inefficient way to fly. What we wanted to do is have the most efficient aircraft for the longest mission portion of it. So for 98% of the trip, our aircraft flies just like a normal airplane. It can also take off and land from any runway with the wings closed. So just like a normal aircraft, it can take the runway and take off, or it can land just like a normal airplane, which is fantastic. And it's only for the vertical portion where the wings are open and the fans do the vertical sort of heavy lifting. So that is very unique in the space where we don't suffer the inefficiencies of all of these different motors, propulsing us for 98% of the mission. We fly in the most efficient way possible. And that's kind of one of 2 parts of our cheat code. The second part is, of course, the hybrid electric engine. As unpopular as it is to say, in 2025, gas, good old-fashioned gas, sustainable aviation fuel, if you'd like, still produces about 30 times as much energy per unit mass, right? So
Mm,
instead of having 3,000 pounds of batteries on board, we can have 100 pounds of batteries on board. Right? It's that big of a factor. We have a few more 100 pounds of batteries than that, but I'm just giving you sort of a direct comparison. So using very efficient en route flight and leveraging the fact that gas is still very highly energy dense, we get much superior range and speed and carrying capacity as the all-electric folks. And that's what's allowing us to go not just within cities, 50 kilometers, but to go 500 kilometers between cities and deliver stuff at useful ranges. And we're pretty proud of that patent that came together. And there's a lot of, again, defense prime contractors and other OEMs that are quite interested in that specialized technology as well.
okay, cool, cool. And one of the questions that came to mind is like, this seems like a like no-brainer kind of solution, I guess. Like, why hasn't anyone else decided to do something like this before? Like, it's more efficient, it's like cheaper, and it flies faster and all that than helicopters. So, yeah, probably why do you think that happened or that hasn't happened yet?
Well, 2 reasons. One, up until about 5 years ago, you couldn't have made it happen. The electric motor power density wasn't there, and the battery power densities weren't there. So
Okay.
we crossed the threshold about 5 years ago where it started to make a lot of sense, and it was operationally possible to make this type of machine. The second thing is that people have designed it So one of the defense prime contractors, I won't say who, I'm not allowed, came to us and said, listen, we designed the exact same thing, but you guys just beat us to the prototype and to the patents. And so thank you. And can we have that thing? And we said, no, but maybe we can strike some sort of deal in terms of royalties and or licensing, etc. If you want to see some of the testing results, or you want to track us through the full scale test program. And so we're in discussions with those types of folks, and so they have done it. We just kind of beat them to it, if that makes any sense.
Okay. That's I guess that's a good position to be in. But also, you talk a lot about patents, so I'm curious to know, like, how many patents do you have in this moment, like utility patents and all that? So yeah, maybe talk
We
a bit
have
more about that.
last count, we have over 20 patents that are directly applicable and climbing. Patents are tricky. You got to figure out what you want to patent. As soon as you patent something, it's out there for everyone to see, and
Yeah.
different nations that don't necessarily respect sort of patent law, they can see exactly what you're doing. So we're taking a very cautious road when it comes to locking down our intellectual property. We have a lot of trade secrets, and I'll tell you that the technology is sensitive. We've cracked a lot of it, but even if someone looked at our patents and tried to directly copy it, have you heard the term "the devil's in the details"? It will take them a long time to figure out some of those details in terms of how to get everything working properly. And we're already off to a head start at that point. So, yeah, that's kind of our stance on patents and how we're approaching intellectual property.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, going back to the like how you power these machines. So there's like an electrical and also kind of fuel component to it. So how do you strike the right balance between those two? Because it might have been big challenge to figure that out.
Yeah. And actually, it was an interesting conversation in terms of the right balance of electrical generation power from the hybrid power system, and then how much battery to have on board in order to support the electric motors. Essentially, we wanted enough generation power on board for two things. The first thing is when the aircraft starts going forward, it generates a lot of lift with the wings open, and that means you can lower the fan speeds quite rapidly. And very, very soon, you can be just on generation power. So you stop drawing from the battery banks and you're only on generator power. And the sooner that happens, the better, right? Because now you can just fly around forever at that speed if you want. As long as you have gas on board, you're good to go. And so that's a balancing act. And then the second one is how fast do you want to regenerate the battery power? So this is really important for the listeners to understand. Unlike most all-electric machines, so an all-electric machine in the advanced air mobility space, it takes off and it burns maybe 30% of its battery power, or 20%. En route, that number still continuously goes down, and you get to the destination with maybe 40% of your energy left, and you don't have a lot of contingency if you have to abort a landing and then try again. You see the gas tank ticking down, or the energy levels ticking down. It's pretty nervous. I've been that person in the cockpit where I've arrived and things don't go always the way you want. You have to abort the landing and go around. Our aircraft recharges itself as soon as it takes off, right? So say we burn 20% of the battery power. As soon as the aircraft starts going forward, it starts a regeneration cycle with, using the generator in the hybrid power system, and it recharges the batteries. So when you start the landing phase, you have full battery power. Now, say something happens. You're landing and a cat runs out onto the landing pad. You got to go around. You take your time. Maybe you fly around for another 5 minutes and recharge the battery bank and start your second landing with full battery power again, which is really, really nice. After landing, say you're at somewhere where there's not all this magnificent charging infrastructure, all you have to do is idle the aircraft and it can recharge itself using its onboard generator. And so that's really that has been very useful for a lot of regional operators and a lot of practically minded helicopter operators. Where they operate a lot of the times in offsite locations. You don't have to find the world's longest extension cord to plug our airplane in, right? It's self self-sustaining, if that makes any sense. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's been very useful when, again, it can circle back to the original question when we're determining how much generation power to have on board versus how much battery to have on board. And we're taking a very user-centric approach and a very operationally flexible approach with safety at the top of everything.
Nice, nice. So, like, what kind of technical challenges are still yet to be fixed or solved? Because, like, it looks like you already have like a pretty good understanding of how you can like actually launch this. But yeah, what's left?
Okay, so areas of technical interest for us in particular, the battery banks. So using readily available technology, so not counting on some future battery breakthrough. So using current chemistries, currently produced cells in aerospace grade battery packs located in various locations. That's one area that gets particular technical interest, if that makes any sense. We have a really, really solid design team looking at it, but that's one challenge area. I'm just going to be honest. And that shouldn't be a surprise. That's a challenge for every single um, aircraft manufacturer that has batteries on board in any significant sort of mass. The second area is our ducted fan technology, right? So we've proven it at the half scale. We've proven it at the full scale in computational fluid dynamics. And with a lot of expert sort of research. I mean, ducted fans have been around for the last 70 plus years. So we have a lot of, it's basically proven technology, but we have to prove it within the context of our exact design. And we're going to be doing that. And that's another focus, right? So keeping the electric motors cool, producing enough thrust, and making sure there's no crazy aerodynamics, that pop up at the full scale that we didn't see. And
Mm.
so far that's going great. We should have a full scale. We actually have built a full scale propulsion unit. It's being installed in our test stand right now, and we'll be testing that, within a few weeks.
Mm. Okay, cool, cool, cool. So, my last question on like more technical side of things or product is actually like how does the maintenance look like? Because typical aircrafts like require a lot of maintenance, and yeah, it's not just like the initial investment is also like maintaining it. So, like how does it compare to typical aircrafts or typical helicopters?
So we have, from the very beginning, focused on maintenance of the aircraft and field reliability, if that makes any sense. So regional operators need these aircraft to fly and fly often. That's how they make money, right? Keeping the aircraft serviceable, keeping it airborne, and making sure it's easy to maintain. Um, Again, my father has been flying and fixing airplanes for the better part of sort of 50 years. He's our chief engineer. And so he is really focused on building an airplane that can be fixed easily because he's tired of things that are hard to work on. A good example is all of those fans that are in the wings. They're all the exact same. So you can pull a couple of pins, drop it down, and fix it in real time, and then put it back up. Or you can pull some more pins, drop the unit out, and replace it with a whole other unit, and it is good to go, right? So quick turnarounds. If any fan doesn't pass in a pre-flight inspection, they can drop it out, put it back in 15 minutes, plug in some contacts, spin it up, and test it, and you're good to go. Everything has the appropriate inspection ports. Everything's been hardened for maintenance, ease of maintenance. Yeah, so the aircraft has been designed from the beginning essentially for ease of maintainability.
Hmm. Okay, okay. So, yeah, maybe just going back a bit to like the certification part of things, because this might be like the most challenging part for an investor to understand, because it goes into a lot of technical details. And yeah, we like investors can't really know what's going on behind like the product and all that. So maybe you could like explain us how does the certification process work, what does it take, and like what are some things that you learned along the way from yeah going through that?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions from investors on this topic. So a very astute observation, and it's a great question. Um, let's back up to 4 years to 2021, right?
Hmm.
There was a question, could these aircraft even be type certified? That was a big question, right? They're multi-copter, all electric designs. Is it going to be too difficult for the regulators to wrap their minds around certification? Fast forward to 2025. I'll give a good example. Joby doing some great work in this space. They will be certified at this point, right? They're very far through the certification process. They spent billions or $1 billion plus, lobbying and getting all of the regulation structure in place with the FAA. It's called 2117 Bravo framework. And they basically established all the rules for aircraft like theirs to be certified. And they spent a huge amount of money doing that. In 2025, the frameworks in both the EASA and FAA and Transport Canada is also getting there here in Canada. The rules are increasingly very, being clarified and they're in place. So that's great. And there are these machines that are going through certification. Now, how do we approach it? So a couple of things. In Canada, Transport Canada, Civil Aviation is the certification authority for our aircraft. We've already had initial discussions with Transport Canada. We're preparing a certification basis as we speak. And in Canada, they're not inundated with 600 different companies coming to them and want certification of these new machines like they are in the United States. So the FAA is seeing a huge amount of traffic here. In Canada, smaller organization, but also agile and able to work with us in a more efficient manner, which is one advantage. The second advantage that we have, a gentleman by the name of John Maris is on our board of directors, a Canadian Aviation Hall of Fame elite test pilot in North America, formed a company with all the best regulators from the public space, brought them into a private company, and we're working with the company called Certification Center Canada, an elite group of folks on a certification plan that is both realistic in timeline and realistic in cost. And so we can provide that clarity to investors, and that's resonating for investors. The third thing is a bit of an annoyance for me because I'll get pushback from investors that haven't really looked into it very deeply, and they say, "Well, Joby has spent $1.5 billion and they're not certified." Well, they didn't spend $1.5 billion on certification, right? There was a huge portion of their marketing arm that was chewing through money. They're paying huge executive salaries. There's tons of G&A overhead. If you carved out the actual work that was done on certification, it's not insignificant, but it's also not $1.5 billion to certify an aircraft in 2025. You just have to be careful about how you account for those costs. And we're pretty proud of our capital efficient approach. So we want to minimize dilution for shareholders. We want to stay lean and do it in the most efficient manner. And we're very fortunate that all those companies spent all that money and established the frameworks that we can take advantage of, like a Advanced Air Mobility 2.0 company that gets to take advantage of all that good work from those folks.
I was about to say that, and I'm glad you also mentioned costs, because I think for your specific situation is an even more important kind of topic, because obviously you want to make sure that every single dollar is allocated as efficiently as possible. So I'm curious to know, like, how are you kind of managing costs, and what is the framework in place for dealing with that?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what we're not doing. We're not spending millions and millions of dollars on marketing and putting out flashy renderings and signing meaningless MOUs with companies. We could have pre-sold 1,000 of these aircraft already with all of the outreach that we've had, but it wouldn't have meant much, right? It's the non-binding LOIs, and we're just not playing that game. We want to be the authentic company developing a great product for a market that is laser focused again on the end user, and we're less interested in being a flashy company that again has all of these promises and then can't fulfill them. So we want to communicate timelines, meet our timelines, execute in a capital efficient manner, which we have so far. And we're spending most of our money on engineering, other than, of course, the public company upkeep stuff. There's certain things you have to do from a legal and regulatory perspective that's expensive, and that's a sort of a given. But we're dedicating all the rest of our resources, 99% of it, to just making forward technical progress. That if when investors start paying attention, it's going to make a big difference.
Okay, got you. That's interesting. Yeah, maybe I think I can drop my analyst hat and actually dive a bit more into your past and like experience. So yeah, just curious to know like how was your childhood like? Like how did you got into like like being a pilot and all that? So maybe get us through that.
Well, it's a really interesting story. It's a kind of an idyllic childhood, to be honest. I mean, so we grew up on the side of a lake, basically. So it was a lake called Balsam Lake, just north of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. If you landed in Pearson Airport and you drove an hour and a half, you'd reach a string of lakes. And my father decided it would be a fantastic idea to buy lakefront property when no one lived up there. Now it's lifestyles of the rich and famous, and it's all the cottagers. But back then there was nobody living up there. They bought a 3-season cottage. And so I remember going to bed at night with my winter jacket and toque and everything on because there was no insulation in the walls or anything. But we did have an airplane so my father and my grandfather built, like, basically reassembled an airplane from scrap metal when it was sort of pulled out of a lake. It had crashed. It was an amphibious airplane, crashed and got destroyed, and they pulled it out of the lake and they fixed it all up. And so we had an old amphibious airplane, lands on the water. It has wheels that come down and they can drive up on land. And we parked that airplane at the house, for most of the year. In the summer, it was parked up on the shore. And then on the winter, it would be put on skis and then sit out on the frozen lake. And so my first flight was when I was 6 months old, I think is the story. And by the time I was 3 years old, my grandfather, who was a World War II bomber pilot, he flew Liberators in World War II. He would sit me on the seat, and so Dad would do this too. Like, I would stand on the seat and like take the big control column and just fly around. So I've been flying since I was about 3 years old. And so that was a pretty interesting childhood. We lived on the water, so water skiing, wakeboarding, all sorts of stuff. And so it was great. It was also in the middle of nowhere. So from the time I was 8 years old, call it, I was just gone all day. I would just leave in the morning and go, meet my buddy. And then I'd just be in the backwoods exploring and catching frogs and climbing trees and, just sort of exploring the world. And, I'd come back when it got dark and just in time for supper sort of thing. And so I spent a lot of time outside playing hockey, playing baseball, lots of sports. That was kind of how growing up was. It was awesome.
Nice. So I guess that it's a pretty decent explanation of why you got into aviation and all that.
Well, actually, the more interesting story is that I did not plan on joining the Air Force. Like
Really?
Out of high school, I had planned on, I planned on being an engineer. So I applied to U of T, Queens, and Western. Those are the three kind of major engineering schools in and around the Southern Ontario area, and in fact in Canada. So there, I applied for aerospace engineering and mechanical engineering. But I was working at a gas station for a guy by the name of Steve Hart and his wife Barb Polomsky. They were both successful naval officers in the Royal Canadian Navy, but Steve had attempted to be a pilot. It didn't work out so well, so we went on to a naval career. But I was working at the gas station trying to make some extra money, and Steve one day just said, "Listen, have you ever thought about going to Royal Military College? That's our equivalent of United States Air Force Academy, USAFA. There's only one of them in Canada, which is interesting." And he said, "By the way, you could fly jets in the Air Force if you wanted to. I know you have a history of flying, and you can also get a mechanical engineering degree at the same time." I thought, that sounds amazing. Why have I not been told about this idea before? Yeah, and so fast forward like 2 weeks, we went down and checked out the campus. RMC is very hard to get into, so he wrote me a nice letter, and I managed to get accepted. And then 2 weeks later after that, I went down, got sworn in, and before I knew it, I was on a bus getting my head shaved, getting yelled at, and I had no idea what I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life ever. Like, what is I did not really appreciate that this was going to be part of it, sort of thing.
Yeah,
But honestly, just met some really awesome folks along the way, and we all kind of succeeded together. And that was true with pilot training as well. And just kind of got lucky and met some good folks and worked hard. And next thing you know, I'm 25 years old flying an F-18, and I thought it was crazy and awesome.
yeah. That is. I guess not many people can tell that story, and so I'm curious to know what kind of lessons have you learned, like both applicable to your personal life but also to business, from flying these like F-18s and all that, because yeah, it's not for everyone for sure.
Now, so the first thing I would say is stay humble, right? The more you know, the more you should know that you don't know about a lot of things, right? The more I learn about anything, science, engineering, flying, you name it, the more I feel like I don't know nearly as much as I should, right? The world is an extremely complicated place. So you got to stay humble about things and, understand that you can be wrong about a lot of things. Keeps you first principles based. And if someone has a better idea or proves your idea is wrong for a number of reasons, just pivot. It's not a personal, affront. You had based on the information that you had at the time, you made some deductive reasoning steps, and you formed a worldview or a sort of what you thought was a fact-based sort of ideology about something. And then, when you're presented with new information that changes, the fundamental aspects of how you came to that conclusion, just, you should be flexible enough to change your mind. And that comes with some humility, right? I certainly don't know everything about everything. And I feel, again, like I don't know most of what I should about any individual topic. So that humility is one thing. Say the second thing is stay curious, right? So the curiosity portion of it is quite interesting. I'm literally interested in almost everything, right? You name it. AI, quantum mechanics, nuclear fusion, like tokamak reactors and stellarators, and small modular reactors, different fusion reactors, thorium molten salt cycles, and all sorts of different stuff. Like, you cannot name a subject that I wouldn't go, oh, that's quite fascinating. Maybe some politics. If you get me into politics, then I start to glaze over. But staying curious, I think, is super important. I think the next one is just a bit of discipline, right? So you got to get up and put the hours in. You can't just Wikipedia everything in life and think that you know it. You have to put the work in. And if you can do that and integrate that over long enough time, staying humble and staying curious along the way, I think you can get pretty far in life, right? But that discipline, it's a struggle every day. You got to get up and get after it on a daily basis. But I'd say those three pillars, alongside some social skills and trying to get to know people and be kind to people, I think that'll take you quite a ways in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some like pretty unexpected insights from what I was expecting. I
Well,
thought
I'm not
you
sure
were going.
now.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say something like, yeah, I was like on a mission and I had to like hold my nerves, and that's how I learned to manage my emotions or something. But
Well,
yeah, I guess
so
that.
there is that, and so if you want a quick story, like I don't have to go into too much, but I've been in a number of sticky situations in an F-18. It's not a safe job, right? It's quite dangerous.
Mhm.
On one mission, my left engine exploded and set everything on
Oh.
fire, and I thought I was going to have to eject a couple of times. Managed to fly it home and land it. It was so badly damaged that they could not fix the airplane. So they put it in a museum afterwards. That's how I got my call sign repo, because they had to repossess the aircraft, is the joke. But once you've been in a number of sort of situations like that, where your life is sort of right in front of you, it allows you to be a lot calmer when something bad goes on at work, or somebody's yelling at you, or something didn't go that well. I tend not to get nearly as emotional about it, right? I just remember that I've almost died a couple of times. I'm not on fire. Everything's fine. I'm going to survive. I'll live to tomorrow. And nothing is a huge, huge deal. And it allows you to stay a little more even keeled. Emotion is the death of reason, right? So
Mm-hmm.
staying unemotional about things, sticking to facts, getting all the facts before making decisions, or at least to the degree that you can get some of those facts. The Air Force did help me out with that kind of perspective on life. Again, doesn't matter what happens to me. I've been spinning out in the in the ice in a road in the car and going into the ditch. It's not that big of a deal. Like I'm going to probably survive it. It's fine. The car will get a little dinged up, but it's just there's just a calmness that comes with having been in a number of sticky situations that I think helps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess I guess that was more of what I was expecting, but I'm glad you also talked about the other part because I guess like keeping it simple is always like the best thing. So yeah, those principles apply kind of to everything in life. Yeah. So my last question before really wrapping up this conversation is, what really motivated you into starting New Horizon aircraft? Because I mean, like obviously your dad was approached by these investors, and you had like, I mean, this kind of economical side of things that was motivating. But yeah, you could just, I guess, continue your regular life and not try to do this really kind of innovative, risky venture. So yeah, just wanted a bit more flavor on that.
Oh, certainly. So it's it is quite interesting. So once we got a really hard look into the market and the technology, frankly, it was exciting, right? So we saw that if we could make this configuration work, and if we could prevent the technology, which looked like it was going to work, it was exciting. And fundamentally, we could build a better future, right? So I have kids, 3 kids, 3, 7, and 9 right now. And, I really want to leave the world in a better place than I found it. And when we look into the technology, we were genuinely excited. I was in particular, and all of the team is genuinely excited about building a machine that will make the world better, right? You want to get somebody to the hospital that's injured on the side of the road in half the time, that will save lives. It's going to save lives when you're paying only 30 cents on the dollar compared to a helicopter, and these aircraft are going to be more widely used. Um, to again in that context, to save lives, to deliver life-saving drugs and all sorts of stuff to remote communities that will improve the way people live around the world almost immediately when these aircraft get out there. All the while producing less emissions and working towards a more kind of sustainable future. So yeah, I was really excited about it. I just want to leave the world in a better place for my kids and set the foundation for, like I said, a better future.
Mm, cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, and yeah, see you next time. And hope that next time we talk, you already have some exciting news. So yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks so much, David. Really appreciate it. Great questions. And I thought it was an excellent conversation. Well done. I can see why you have the following that you do.